Episode 4, Modernizing Security Gates.
Welcome to the AppSec Masterclass, a podcast that helps you build an AppSec program that helps you developers build safer software one episode at a time.
Hi, I'm Jamie, a consultant for Synopsys that helps companies build their AppSec programs.
And I'm Jazz, a consultant for Synopsys that helps AppSec programs implement their security solutions. We are here with Mira Rao, who kickstarted Synopsys DevSecOps and CI/CD development security practice, who actually lead the practice and help us implement all the security practices and all things related to DevSecOps. Hey Mira, welcome.
Hello. Hey Jazz. Hey Jamie. How are you?
I'm good. If you can just give us some background of anything that you want to introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, sure. So like many of you know, I have been working in this software security industry for 14 years now. So I think one of the key things to uh, look at is what how transformation happened from the time I joined this industry to where it is now, right? So in the beginning, when I started, we were so focused on manual code review and manual penetration test, right? Like every activity that we did was focused on that. Slowly, static analysis tools started to come into picture, and then I was involved of it with lot of activities automating those static analysis tools at many customers. Then as we were automating those static analysis tools, slowly came dynamic testing. Why should we do these manual penetration tests? Can we bring some of those, automate that? And then I became part of automating those. And then somewhere in there, right, I think around mid 2010, there was a lot of open source that was being used, and software composition analysis became a thing, right? And then we started seeing this, like as and when new activities were being introduced, we started saying you need to automate all of these in the pipeline. Right now that pipeline became humongous, right, with every activity taking such a long time. So over the past at least like 7 8 years, I have been focused working with our customers, helping them build DevSecOps solutions, automating all of these activities. How do we bring that culture of automation, culture of measurement, culture actually of sharing, right? How and when do you share some of these activities? So I have been enjoying a lot doing a lot of these activities, helping my customers. And then on top of that, one other thing that I would like to mention is I'm also focused very much on building this culture of diversity and inclusion, right? So that's very passionate. I'm very passionate about that, whether it's helping women or in general people from across different backgrounds, different cultures, different countries to feel that they are included, right? Having just diversity is not enough. Being part of something broader in this AppSec world and being included, I think, is key. So I think that also is another topic that I am very passionate about. Back to you guys. Like, if you give me a chance to speak, I can go on and on and on for hours.
It's okay. It's okay, Mira. I love this passion, really. This is what we usually need in all aspects of life, right? To have this passion to either do better implementing software, do better thing in even developing the culture and learning from each other's, right? Empowering
Exactly.
others. That's what we're trying to do.
Yep, thanks for joining us. Here's the problem. Insecure software can end up in production. If you aren't ensuring that every release has had the right checks in place, vulnerabilities can be missed. There are so many moving parts that checking the right things at the right times can feel like an insurmountable task when being wrong once can land you on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So here's the solution. Traditional security gates such as permit to build and permit to deploy gates hold back insecure software and have served the old school risk mitigation purpose. These tend to be big manual processes where all the boxes are checked right before moving from one stage to the next. While good enough for teams that are getting started in security, it's time to move past big traditional security gates and begin distributing risk mitigation through the development cycle.
Typically, for any development life cycles, right, you do have this methodologies, let's say going from waterfall cycles or agile, where you start from development, you're writing the code, going to productions. Where you think that there is a fit of security activities, like there is a culture of shift to the left, right, where you have a lot of
Mhm.
reviews happening, peer reviews, manual reviews, automations, where you think that we can actually feed some of the activities there, and how we're actually going to organize the streamline of that movement of, like, like when you inject security into the cycle, right?
Mhm. I think one of the major changes that I'm seeing right now in the industry is the way software is developed, right? So you mentioned about waterfall. In the beginning, all of the activities that we talked about in the industry, or as an authority, like whether it was being all of us being part of Digital, or even now, we were the authority that we came up with those secure SDLC, right? Saying you need to do all of this. But then one thing that we did, I don't think we envisioned, was this rapid velocity with which developers are pushing code to production, right? So all the activities that we talk about, whether it is performing all the way at the left, whether you're doing security requirements or you're doing a threat modeling or a risk analysis, they take time, right? And then as you start moving towards the right, when you have code, we say, hey, you need to do static analysis, you need to do software composition analysis. But one thing that we forgot while we were talking about all of these activities was how much manual effort it takes in order to perform all of those, right? So and the expertise that is required to perform those activities, and you don't have that time to perform them time and time and time again for every single release, right? We didn't even think about that when the developers were slowly moving towards that agile methodology or DevSecOps, right, wherein they started pushing code fast and then security was left behind. So, one of the things that I see now when I talk to all the customers is they want some of these activities to be performed in their version control repository, right? So, they may be using GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. There are different branching strategies that our customers are using. So, when they do a pull request from their development branch to the main branch, that's immediately where they want to perform at least some of those activities, right? Because you're just merging it from your development branch to either a release branch or a production branch, and you want to know, did I introduce new vulnerabilities, right? Either through your static analysis or through your software composition analysis scans that you run, or any quality activities that you run at that point in time, right? And if tools are not able to work in that area, I think that is where we are seeing lot of uh, reluctance from the developers saying, if you want to run this way right in your SDLC and give me a report, like a PDF report or an Excel spreadsheet with like hundreds and thousands of issues, I won't even look at those, right? So I think that mindset has changed, especially with developers. Rather than focusing with SSG, I think if we are able to focus on what do the developers need and provide them that feedback at that stage, I think that would help the entire organization so that they don't push insecure code into production. I think that is what I am seeing in the industry right now.
the feedback from the tools at early stage before they actually push that to the say to the main branch, right? Like this is where we can say that we can run maybe a mini version of a tool, right? Like a tool that might support looking to certain rules, and developers will go in and look at those. Where should we put those gating to make sure that at least we're not flooding 100 vulnerabilities later on in the.
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? That is something that when I talk to our customers, I talk to them about that. So again, this is a sentence I think I have used in all my webinars, all my blogs. Tools are built to find more, right? But then if we are not able to customize those tools to the requirements of our projects, then we are not using it effectively, right? So simple example, now when I say you need to be able to run the tool, whether it is static analysis or software composition analysis, when you do a pull request, now when you run the tool, it gives you like hundreds of findings. Do I need to stop the pull request for all the 100 findings? No, right? Because your findings are categorized critical, high, medium, low based on the severity. It's also categorized based on the type of vulnerabilities, right? Like, say, cross site scripting, SQL injection, or maybe OWASP top 10. So, as a team, I think the development team and the security team need to come to a conclusion saying, at this stage in the pipeline, when we are doing a pull request and then we have a gate, right, either to allow you to continue or break, we are going to allow certain kind of categories, like we don't care about medium, low. Lot of organizations do that, right? We do a lot of security activities where they say, like, look at all of the medium and low, highlight them, and mark it as I don't care, right? So, why break those build for the vulnerabilities that you truly don't care, right? So, in most of those pull requests, we are drilling down to the level where you specify what are the categories that you care about, what is the type of severity that you care about, and then you provide that immediate feedback at that stage for those range of values, right? And then everything else, yeah, you have either 3 months or 6 months to fix those. Let those go. But then at that stage in the pipeline, when you're defining those gates, as information security team, we would have to work with the development team and ask them, what is the top 10 or even what is the top 5 that your team truly cares about, and you don't want to push those to production and you want to catch it at this stage in the pipeline, right? So you define those gates, you finally categorize and then customize those, and then make it part of your breaking criteria, right? Not everything that the tool finds. I think that has helped a lot in many, many customers, right? Because filtering those values and then providing them, and then it's not just breaking the build, right? You also need to make sure that you provide adequate guidance for the developers to fix those issues, right? I think that has worked in the industry that I am working with right now.
So, from AppSec program manager, let's say you have this program, you say, okay, I'm going to define some of the gates, I'm going to define some of the rules that I want to prioritize. What's the effort level that is required? Like, is it something that is going to take longer time for us to define that, or what's the thing that you say as a prerequisite, or maybe like what some of the challenges you might find to straight, let's say, define.
Mhm. So I think one of the we did that at several clients. One of the biggest challenges was the amount of tools that the organization used, right? Because remember, each and every tool, when you're whether it is static analysis tool, there were organizations which use some commercial tools for static analysis. Then there were some of them which used open source tools because they have different languages that the development teams use, different frameworks, different technologies that the development teams use. So for us, in order to abstract that and say, as soon as we write this, whatever you may call this plugin or script, to work for one language, one technology, it was not easy for us to just take that plugin that we wrote and then roll it across the entire org, right? So what we did was we looked at, okay, let's look at the percentage, like how many applications in your organizations are written in Java. Okay, does this work with Java? Yes, in the early, like 2015, 2016, there was still a lot of organizations where 75% of their applications were written in Java. So we rolled it across applications which use Java. And then when we saw that it was being adopted across many, many projects, then we took a step back and said, what is the next set of languages that the teams use, right? So then there was like maybe Ruby and Rails, or maybe it was Python, maybe it was a PHP. So then we started seeing how can we abstract such that this can work now across those three different other languages, right? So the goal is to see if the organization has an application inventory, and then see what languages, what frameworks, what technologies, what tools do they use, and then tailor the needs according to those. So initially, yes, it will take time for us, took time for us to build those plugins. But then once we had an idea about how to abstract the plugin, to talk to different tools, to talk to different languages, technologies, to different build systems, I think it was easy for us to abstract most of the activities that was being done and roll it across the organization. So yeah, initially it will take a time. Anything, right? Even rolling out static analysis initially takes time. Same way here, right? But then I think having that expertise now, we are able to look at different build systems, different version controls, different even communication channels, right? Initially, where were we using Slack or Microsoft Teams? We were not, right? But then now most organizations use them, and then we also have built in adapters to make sure that whatever is your communication channel that the team uses, we are able to provide that feedback, continuous feedback to those developers, and then provide them that access, right? So, yeah, I would say depending on who is working on this, how much knowledge do they have in the application security space, how much knowledge do they have in these technologies, right? It used to take anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks in order to build the basic version and then roll it out after that. Once you have it up and running, then you roll it out across orgs, right?
So this is if the language supports certain tools. You have static analysis that is happening for Java or .NET.
Mm-hmm.
What about a language that does not have any tools that scans for vulnerabilities? How would that fit into the concept of trying to filter out or trying to break the build?
Mm-hmm.
How that is going to happen? Like, can the gate in this case be a manual one, or it needs just to be like something as part of a pipeline or something?
Yeah, I think we also did that, right? It's not just enough to say that this language has this powerful static analysis tool. What we saw, even when that static analysis tool was very powerful in providing uh, like almost true positives, which never happens. All of the tools have false positives and false negatives. But what we saw was when organizations made changes for newer frameworks, right? Like, say, for example, the one channel that I saw personally was when organizations brought in, like, say, Spring Security or Spring Framework, where you do a lot of this configuration in XML files, right? Static analysis tools never found anything. And most of this we did for authentication, authorization, cryptography, single sign on, right? So, what we did was, when we saw that there were changes for these sensitive APIs, right, or sensitive packages, we were able to trigger or say, hey, yeah, there is still static analysis going on, but maybe someone needs to do a manual code review, especially when you make changes to your single sign on, two factor authentication. You also may want to look at the threat model itself, because you introduce new controls, you introduce new attack surfaces, right? So we were able to also trigger manual activities, like even when you're doing a pull request saying, hey, we see lot of major changes that are happening, maybe someone needs to do a manual code review, whatever is the procedure in that org, right? Like maybe send an email notification, or send a Slack notification, or create a Jira ticket, right? So we were able to look at those sensitive packages and trigger those out of band activities, right? And these are all, again, you can implement these even with simple scripts, right? Because it's a simple grep to see what package changed, or if I have access to your release notes, right? So because most organizations have a way to tag their releases saying these are all the changes that are going in through in this release, we were able to look at those release notes and then trigger those out of band activities, right? So yeah, it's not just always that a language has good tool. Even when it has good tools, you may still need lot of manual activities that need to happen. And by building those checkpoints at various stages in your SDLC, we were able to trigger those activities.
Oh, so you're pivoting to where I was going to ask. So there would be some checkpoints, right? That's what the usual expectation. Would you try to enforce multiple gates, or you say, okay, there will be some checkpoints that may be like a minor reviews accepting until the end where you can say it's either go or now go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people will fight
Yep.
for that. They will say, this is an urgent release. We don't have any time. Everything has been checked out. I don't want to have any something unexpectedly happening at the end of my pipeline saying that I cannot release or deploy, right? So how do you actually manage the situation?
I think we saw that across so many organizations, right? Like a lot of companies that I worked with, whether it was big banks or financial institutions, or healthcare providers or automotive industries, they had also a lot of compliance requirements, right? So one of the things that we saw was, especially like in the recent years, in the beginning, again, most of them were using those legacy version control, so you couldn't enforce a lot of those. You can do those now. So again, during the merge phase, when the developer is merging, we have a checkpoint there to see, did you introduce new critical high vulnerabilities. And then that is one checkpoint where most of them have agreed. I didn't see too much resistance there. And then when we started saying that after you run each and every tool in the pipeline, right? Like you run static analysis, you run software composition, and there was a lot of friction because they didn't want us to pause after each and every one of those, right? Because the way an organization looks at risk is completely different from the way we look at it, right? So there were certain places where they said, we will run all of the activities, right? Whether it was static analysis, software composition analysis, some manual penetration test, we push it to a consolidated dashboard. You get a holistic score, like when you combine all of them, because I don't want to just break, because I had one single cross-site scripting, you breaking the build and not allowing me to go, right? So there are organizations which said, let's push all of the defects to this one centralized dashboard. We have all of the issues from our quality tests, we have all the issues from our security tests. Now they had their own scoring criteria, A to F, right? So if it is anything between E and F, anything above D, the grade, then we will have a sign off authority who looks at it and decides, is this a go no go decision? But then there were certain organizations where any even single, like especially cross-site scripting or SQL injection, was a no-go decision, right? So they said, let's introduce this after each stage is run, right? So if static analysis found any critical cross-site scripting or SQL injection, notify whoever is the sign off authority, and then they decide, what do I need to do? Do I need some additional controls in the continuous deployment phase? Do I need to notify my firewall team, right? So based on the risk of the application, things changed. If it was externally facing, critical, lot of compliance and auditing needs that needed to be satisfied, the team also, the development team was also open to saying, okay, let's introduce gates. And then again, if nothing happened, the pipeline used to be smooth, right? Like you were able to deploy to your continuous delivery or continuous deployment stages as quickly as possible. But then if any of the tools found critical or high, and then with high confidence, not for the ones which were low confidence findings, then they were okay to pause the pipeline, notify someone, and then say, yeah, I think I understand the risk from this, I give a go decision, or no, this is too risky for us to let this go to the next stage, and they would break the pipeline. So there was no one size fits all. So we used to work with organizations to understand what was the risk profile, what were some of the challenges that even we can easily say introduce all these gates, but then there are inherent challenges that those gates used to bring. So understanding and then working with them and redefining those helped us.
Okay. So for a client or customer who is not mature enough, like they don't have a lot of tools, they don't have any consolidated dashboard, they have, let's say, one or two tools that they can run in the pipeline. They just deploy, release, they work on their own silos, right? How would you try to work with them to start having that process saying, turn on those rules for the SaaS tools, include this tool in your pipeline, and then have that mechanism of analyzing the results?
I think even before defining those gates and everything else, one of the things that we worked with those organizations was first to build that culture of security, right? Because they need to understand that security is as much important as your quality issues. So in most of those cases, what we did was to have like a parallel pipeline, right? So they had their own pipeline. We never stopped them from going into production. But then we used to have a parallel pipeline where we ran all the scans for them without slowing them down. And then through our pipeline, when we found critical or high issues, we were able to provide that feedback as early as possible to the teams, right? So when we were doing this, one of the key things that we saw was to make sure that we triaged all the findings. So we didn't uh, push like all like false positives, issues which would, where we would lose the confidence of the developers, right? So the goal was initially building this parallel pipeline, running those activities in parallel, and then providing them that feedback with the same mechanism that they had in their actual pipeline, right? So if they use Slack, if they use Microsoft Teams, if they used email, to notify their development team in this parallel pipeline, we also did the same thing. But then we never stopped them. And as and when they were able to get that confidence, no, I think this SSG team is trying to work with us. They are not pushing down every single vulnerability that the tool finds. Then we were able to get their confidence, and then slowly this parallel pipeline started moving into their main pipeline, right? So I think building that culture was key before even telling them that we are going to introduce this gate from tomorrow, we are going to break the build. That never worked, right? Even when we were using tools to run in their IDEs, we saw that forcing that never worked. Working with them, being part of their sprints, being able to look at how they work, being able to show them that we are there to help them and not impose on them, I think made all the difference that I saw over the past, like, literally 14 years, right? Like, working with them, understanding their application, what were the issues that truly mattered for them. Like, one of the mistakes in the beginning years that I saw where most organizations were failing was just turning on the OWASP top 10, even when it was a microservice which didn't have a front end, which didn't have a database at the back end, and you were turning on OWASP top 10 and then just pushing those. And they used to literally laugh, right? The developers.
Yeah, the
Like,
rules.
I think so. The initial was, we are not going to break the build, we are not going to define this gate, we are going to let you know you already have a automated pipeline. So when we find critical issue, you are able to quickly fix it, push next set of changes, and then we are able to run those scans on our end, right? So that built lot of confidence in the development team. So going forward, they were like, okay, I think we are confident enough now, let's bring these tools into our pipeline, right? I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, that helps with them merging the two pipelines.
Yep.
But in terms of compliance, you're still relying on a trust of the developers to actually say, oh, there's a critical finding, I'm going to actually fix it, right? But if there is no way for enforcement, some people might slack off.
Mhm. No, there is sign off, right? Because again, this sign off, either the way we implemented across many orgs was it would look at their defect tracking, right? Whatever they used, some used Jira, some use Rally, some use Archer. The goal was to go talk to your defect tracking, look at all of the severities, right? Because most organizations have, if there is a critical, you have to fix within 7 to 10 days. If there is a high, you have to fix it by the next sprint, right? So we were able to actually query their defect tracking, whether it was introducing that sign off in their pipeline, query that defect tracking, get the number of those critical high, and then notify that sign off authority and also log that, right? Because someone, like, when we notify them, they may come and say, yeah, I know there's a critical, but then we have additional control, so I'm accepting the risk. We log all of those details because in most organizations, the auditing team also comes into picture to look at those, right? So you can pull all of those logs from who the developer was who checked in the code to who was the sign off authority who signed off when there was a critical. You have all of the logs, so you can pull it into any logging dashboard to see that trend, right? So this is not to penalize the developers, but then maybe to provide more education for them, more training for them, one-on-one sessions, so that the developer knows how to write secure code. So there is a lot of checks and balances in place across, even when you build those automation end to end. So whether it is for your compliance teams, whether it is for your auditing teams, or whether it is for your C level executives to look at each and every product and say, what is the trend, right? I have invested so much in application security. Are we finding less, or are we finding more and then also fixing more? Like all of the trends that they want to see, the metrics that they want to see is available for them through these comprehensive logging that happens within the pipeline, right? So they can look at that and say, across the organization, which team is performing well, what are some of the additional training that is needed. If we are finding way too many issues through penetration test, how do I bring that information back to my developers, right? How do I cross train them to understand why are we not finding these issues earlier, right? Like there might be certain environment issues that we are not looking at. Maybe our testing stages, or other stages earlier in the SDLC do not match the final deployment. Maybe there is discrepancies in the running environment, so that's why the penetration testing team finds a lot more issues. So there are a lot of information that you can gather from all of the activities that happen in your SDLC, right? So sign off is key, having those logged is key, and then just having them logging and not using those logs is not going to help. So pulling those logs into the dashboards and querying and seeing the information that we truly care about also is critical for organizations.
Okay. What they will usually ask for.
So I think there is, based off of the release, like the organizations that I have worked with, if it is a minor release, again, I haven't seen them asking too many questions. This was a bug fix, this was a hot fix again. But then if there were major releases, the auditing team, especially if they had like needs for compliance, they asked, okay, show me what testing activities did you do, show me the results of static analysis. Why were some of them, like if someone like bulk updates certain vulnerabilities to be false positives, I have seen them ask, why was this done, right? So they go into detail about why certain issues were accepted and pushed to production. What additional controls did you have in the deployment environment where you took this decision? If you said you're running static analysis, but then here it only shows 3 rules were run. So even for static analysis, they had, I think one of the companies had that there were no rules that could be configured. You had to run it with with all the sets of rules that the tool came, and then you had to show the full triage. So you cannot skip running certain rules. So there were a lot of those that were part of those that they asked. So we also had, like within the pipeline, when we had configured the rules, there were also scans that were run on a regular basis with no configuration of rules at all. And even we were able to triage all of those rules. That was part of us doing triaging for all the rules and having those comments saying, why did I mark something as a false positive? So that when the auditing team came, we could clearly explain why it was a false positive, why some of the issues were marked as we don't care, we are not going to fix. So there clearly had to be comments for all of those issues as well.
So you mentioned depends on the minor or major releases. There will be certain audit requests like requirements, right? Thinking back from the gating perspective, will be any difference if, let's say, this is a minor release versus major release versus, let's say, emergency, like you actually have to fix something in production? Would gating then be different?
Yeah, I think it will be, right? Because when you have minor releases or even when you have bug fixes, there is no time for running all of those activities, right? Like especially for emergency fixes, if my pipeline is still running all the static analysis, everything else, you cannot do that. So based off of the release type also, we decide what should be the depth of the analysis that needs to happen, right? So if it is a major release, yes, we want to perform a lot of those activities. But then if it is a critical or a minor release, then we may want to asynchronously run some of those activities and then still allow them to go to production, right? Because they fix something major, and then we want them to push that code to production, right? So again, it depends. We also want to look at all the other requirements that an organization has, in order to look at, okay, what did you fix, how big of a change was it, and then based off of that, run the right tools with the right depth and the right analysis, right? So if it is a minor fix, maybe we may run a incremental scan to make sure that they didn't introduce any new vulnerabilities and allow them to quickly go to the next stage. But then if it is a major release, yes, there are a lot of other gates that you want to have, um, within the organization. Yes, I think it should change. The gating should not be static, right? Always saying you always have this gate, you then the development team will go crazy, even the operations team, right?
Mhm.
One of the things that I saw in the industry is the development team and the operations team became together, DevOps, but then the security team is still siloed. Whatever we may talk, whatever we may say, they are still struggling to be part of this DevOps team, right? So I think if we are able to come up with those dynamic, and then intelligent gates rather than static gates. Okay, you have the gate here, here, and here. No matter what, we will not allow you to bypass these. Then we are losing, being part of the DevOps team, right? So whereas when we come up with those intelligent dynamic gates, which like I think that is where which is able to look at all of the metrics, which is able to look at all of the inputs or outputs from different stages in the SDLC, and then come up and say, I know there was no gate defined at this stage, but then I'm looking at all of the outputs from the different activities that happened. I'm going to stop you, right? I think that is where a lot of organizations would be beneficial, would be helpful for them to have those dynamic gates rather than just those static gates.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. Like, it will be actually beneficial for everyone to, based on your conditions, maybe even your risk of your application, if it's exposed externally versus if it's only internal application, you should not be treated the same, but the same set of expectations should be there, that
Yes.
you're not introducing any risk, you're not introducing any vulnerable code. However, we might be more lenient in terms of when we are going to stop you versus ones that is really uh, there's a higher risk in, let's say, from customer point of view. So they say no, we will actually have more rigorous gateway, or say that yeah, you still have to have a sign off, you still have that tracking and auditing for maybe compliance, right? So
Mhm.
that's something that I also agree that.
I think one example I want to give is like a lot of people have like that, is when we ourselves go to for a annual physical, right? So in the beginning, when I used to go for a annual physical, the doctors used to ask me my history, right? Like what happened with your grandparents, what happened with your parents, and then the physician would like, yeah, you have a clean sheet of health, and they used to send, right? So a couple years back, when my mom had a pacemaker, and when I went for an annual physical, that time was the first time that they said, okay, let's do an EKG for you, right? Because now in your history there is problem with related to heart. That is when they started annually saying, hey, let's also do cholesterol check, let's also do all of these, right? So you need the risk changes over the years, right? And same thing happens in our software industry. Like today your application might be 100% secure, but then if you're using one or two open source components that have critical vulnerabilities, all of a sudden the risk of your application change the next day, right? So one small event is enough for you from being a low risk application to a critical risk application, right? So I think it's very important to look at that aspect and then see from a risk based perspective, from rather than defining all those gates that you need to do this at this time, and then the frequency. Once you see certain things happening, you should be able to adapt um, intelligently and then make those changes, right? So when you look at your doctors, they have this data from somewhere where they feed all of the risk for you, right? And then even though I was so scared, she came back and said, even though your mom has a pacemaker, for you to get that, the risk level is 0.009. So right, so you should be able to put in all those data, come up with a risk score, and then decide, yeah, what do I need to do? And then having those intelligence built, whether it is for gating, whether it is for communication to different authorities within your organization, right? I think it's key, or whether it is providing that continuous feedback for your developers, not overburdening them with every vulnerability that the tool finds. I think that is where you will be able to build that culture across and then truly scale application security, right? Because from the day I joined this industry to now, the risk has increased like what, thousandfold. um, and then we still have the OWASP top 10, we still have issues with cross-site scripting, but then the landscape changed, right? Now you have more containers, you have cloud, you want to run so many other different types of scans. So the activities also exponentially increased, and then the complexity also exponentially increased, and then attackers became exponentially smart, right? So I think having that intelligence built across, and then helping the development teams as well as the security teams, right? Like we as industry experts need to come up with innovative solutions to bridge those gaps for all three, right? Whether it's the development team, whether it's the operations team, or whether it is the security team.
I agree with you, really. Any other question that we never ask you that you'd like to ask and answer?
Ask myself and answer, right? No, I think one of the key things, like I mentioned throughout, is building that culture, right? So a lot of organizations assume that when I buy this glorified tool, right, I bring it into my organization and then it solved all my problems. No, it actually increased your problems. Just buying a tool, however good the tool might be, and not able to customize, not able to roll it out properly, and then not able to share that feedback with the broader organization is not going to help, right? I saw that over the years. And then every few years they say, okay, I rolled this tool out, it isn't working properly. This new tool came in. I'm going to scrap this tool. I'm going to bring this new tool in. That has never solved the problems, right? A tool is never going to solve your problem. I think building that culture, making sure that you bring in the true experts who are able to roll it out properly across your organization, and then working with the development team, right? Because in most organizations, I still see that all the application security testing tools are sold to the SSG, right? And they have a hard time convincing the developers to actually run the scans. So I think building that culture, um, more than the culture of automation, the culture of sharing, right? And the culture of measuring everything. If you don't measure, you are not able to understand what is happening, right? And not using that measurement properly is the one that is creating all the challenges, right? Yeah, you have lot of metrics from so many tools and technologies, but if you're not able to consolidate the way you want and use that to benefit the organization, that's not going to help, right? So put aside automation for a second and then build that culture of sharing and measurement, and then bring all the automated tools in order to automate, right? I think that will help organizations scale, and then also truly be that DevSecOps company, right? Because if not, there is no DevSecOps without culture. I think that's key.
I agree with you. I mean, the tools will never solve the problem. Some people might run the tools without even looking at the results and say, "Yeah,
Mhm.
we're in comply, we're running the tools." But if you don't have this culture of, I'm going to look, I'm going to actually understand what is reporting, I'm making a decision points, when to fix, how to fix, have this roadmap for, let's say, other vulnerabilities that I might later on fix based on my workload. If you don't have that culture built in from the beginning, you'll find a lot of resistance, right? And it will not be a smooth ride. And there might be a lot of issues that is going out that could be fixed earlier in stage, just because
Mhm.
that culture is not adopted to say, oh,
Exactly.
let's look at the tools, like let's look at the results, let's see if this is can feedback to our coding. Maybe we might need more training, we might need more additional things that can help us, but without have that intelligence or that data or that feedback coming back, maybe from a gateway or maybe from, let's say, a checkpoint, you would not be able to understand what is happening with your life cycle of your, like, your software, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks for showing up and joining us today. Where can our listeners find you? Where else are you out in the info space?
Oh, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, very active. Maybe not myself, but then I think the marketing team puts out like so many blogs and webinars that I talk about, that I write on LinkedIn, on Twitter. So I just try to like those and share them. So yeah, if anyone wants to get a hold of me, they can find me. They can search just Meera Rao and they'll find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, you know?
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you, really, Mira.
We are trying to grow this little thing to help the community. If you got something out of this and know anybody who could benefit from what we're saying here, please share. Word of mouth is everything in this business. If we're awesome, tell a friend. If we're not, tell us how to get better. Please reach out to us via Twitter at AppSecMC or subscribe to our podcast in your podcatcher of choice. Our website is www.appsecpod.com. The music is by Lobo Loco. We're talking about security topics that might be helpful to you, but this is really just a chat. Please don't take this as gospel. Be safe and secure, everyone.